Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, Resident underslash of underslash Collinwood for BitChute. I'm gonna do a couple videos tonight. First, I'm gonna do a Halloween H20 video, and this video was inspired by a debate done by the Myers fan and at Everyday Horror. Um, what was H2O for me? No, they didn't ask me to do this video. Their video inspired mine. I want to stress that. I went to go see Halloween H2O when it was in theaters. I saw it twice. And I did the same thing for Resurrection, too. You know, expectancy is a word that's often used for a fan when they see a movie, when they are getting ready to go see a movie, I should say. And that's what H2O was for me. I was expecting a lot out of this movie specifically. More so, that's to me what H2O was for people who had been following the franchise, at least from my opinion, and especially for me. For me specifically, and I think for my brother even too. I've told you guys before, me and my brother had heavy conversations about Halloween H2O. I think it was the Halloween we most talked about because we were both expecting so much out of it. And the one thing I know we were expecting was, okay, Halloween H2O, 20 years after the original murders, 20 years later, are we finally getting the timelines completely timed in? We knew going in 4 through 6 were tied together with 1 and 2. We knew that. It was this film that is now 20 years later, Jamie Lee Curtis is coming back. Was this going to be the movie that the end all to be all? To me, that's what was H2O built that way. In some sense, yes. The trailers, for me, from my standpoint, in my opinion, when I saw Jamie Lee Curtis in these trailers, my first thought was, oh my god, Laurie Strode faked her death. She's alive. And that's something you easily got from the trailers. The trailers were played so much on school telly. I shit you not. In my homeroom, they had these televisions. In my homeroom in school, they had televisions. And on the televisions, they would play programs, commercials for the television programs, prior for the television news. And they would play a lot of commercials. And one of the commercials I saw was Halloween H2O, and they played that commercial pretty much every day, goddamn day. And so when I saw Jamie Lee Curtis, I'm like, Laurie Strode's alive. She faked her death, of course. That's something I got from the trailer, not the movie. Prior to the movie, I'm thinking, okay, now how are they going to explain that? And did she abandon Jamie, or are they going to explain this? I was so excited to see this movie. And then there's also the other part of this for me where I was explaining Jamie Lee Curtis being in a Halloween movie. People who were a lot younger than me had not watched John Carpenter's Halloween 1 or Halloween 2. You gotta remember, 1998 was a much different time than what we live in now. It doesn't seem like that, right? Just 20 years ago? But it was. This was pre-internet explosion. Yeah, there was internet, but this was before it was huge. You just pretty much had mainstream television, and your mainstream advertisements was television and still radio. So, and newspaper. But, so H2O was plugged a lot on television. That's where you saw a lot of the Halloween H2O commercials. Whether it be in school or at home, wherever you saw them, you saw them. or heard them. But I was explaining to a lot of students who were younger than me what Halloween, why Jamie Lee Curtis was in this Halloween movie. Well, I said, well, she was in the original Halloween. There's an original Halloween. Well, yeah. Well, why is it called H2O? That's water. Well, it's 20 years after the original murders. What original murders? And again, you get into the first two films. Well, how many films is there altogether? Well, there's six total, and the third one has nothing to do with Michael Myers. That's Season of the Witch, and then you're stuck explaining the whole franchise, right? That's what H2O was for me. Explaining the franchise to people who had no idea what the hell was going on and why the hell Jamie Lee Curtis was even in a Halloween movie. I'm serious. I shit you not. There are people at that point in time, they never heard of the movie Halloween. They never heard of Halloween 2. The older people like my brother and his friends and their age, they heard of Halloween. I was fortunate enough to be born into, well, not born into a good family, but raised by a mother who let us watch horror. That was the advantage I had. And I can't ever repay my mom for that. My mom gave me an institution of movies. So, and the first movie I saw was John Carpenter's Halloween. So I knew what Halloween was. I'd followed the franchise extensively. So going into it, I'm just excited. I have such high expectation for this movie. You know how they play the music? It goes da 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 da, and there's the big uplift. Going in H2O, that's how I felt. That's how I felt for H2O. I felt so overjoyed. I'm like, oh my god, this is gonna be it. They're gonna do it all in this movie. And then came the movie itself, and a lot of people talk about how much money this movie made. It resurrected the franchise. It may very well have in the box office, but from the fan standpoint, it was the most overhyped Halloween in history. I mean, for me, from somebody who went into theaters to see it, from somebody who watched the trailers, the expectancy of this film, you know, from somebody who went to go see it. That was my expectancy. That was my brother's expectancy. That was some of his friends' expectancy. You know, did I realize it was a time jump? Yeah, when they're not mentioning, I got that right away. Okay, they're not acknowledging the other films in a sense enough to count. Was that frustrating? Yes, because there's so much they could have done with this film. I'll forget the timeline connection for a second and focus primarily on Laurie. Here's Laurie Strode, this woman who's faked her death, literally faked her death to get away from her brother, who is this unstoppable force. Whether you feel Michael Myers is immortal or not is going to be one of always debate. But from the standpoint of Laurie Strode, this son of a bitch was gonna keep coming after her, and she just could not live in Haddonfield knowing this. And that's what caused her to fake her death. And obviously she became pregnant. And here she is 20 years later. We have not seen her. We've not heard from her. And she has this dream sequence that's okay, it's not bad, but when she wakes up, there's things they could have did. They could have had her open her eyes, and now standing above her would have really been John, but they could have had her hallucinate it was Michael. And then when he goes to stab her, she's like, it's him touching her, and she smacks her own son, and he's like, what the fuck's wrong with you? And she's like, I'm sorry, there's things they could have done there to make her more terrified, make her realize this woman, this is not just haunting her for the past 20 years. This has haunted her every day of her fucking life, and it still does. That's something they could have did more for H2O when I first saw it. H2O is not a perfect film. It's far from it. It has a lot of imperfections. Where the imperfections of the first film made the film unique and fun, H2O's imperfections are pure frustration and just agonizing at times. I'm not saying H2O isn't a fun movie to watch. It is, and I'll get to where it's fun. I'll get to where I thought they hit good moments. But for me, H2O, for the timeline thing, what could they have done? Well, the writers couldn't come up with a way to make Jamie Lee Curtis look good and know about Jamie. Here's a newsflash: she doesn't have to know Jamie was alive. Remember, this film's not only shot in 1998, it's set in the present day. It's set in 1998. So again, this is pre-internet explosion. John and Jamie could have been born twins, and the doctors, or Dr. Wynn, they could have tied Dr. Wynn in right here. Maybe she turned Wynn because Loomis would have still been in a hospital. He was still trusted at that time, and he told her, hey, Jamie died during childbirth. And listen, back in that day, and even now, that's still a common thing amongst women losing babies in childbirth. That's something that does happen. And they could have did that and still kept the credibility of that character. She never knew Jamie was alive. And you might say, well, she never heard about the incidences. She may not have. Again, this is pre-internet explosion. You don't have all this live feed shit to the extreme that you do now. And that's the thing. I mean, this is film. Could have did so many things to protect that character and still got her over with the audience. I do feel there's things they did to get her over somewhat. The best part for me, for Laurie Strode, is when she is hallucinating. And they didn't do it enough, but they did it just enough to keep you interested in her, to make you feel sorry for her. And I'm just thinking, man, if you could just add in Jamie and have her not know, there's a way you could do this. There was an interview done by the Myers fan, Darnell Wake, shout out to him, and he interviewed Justin Bain, and they were talking about Halloween, and I think Justin had mentioned, why not one of the two detectives go out and track Michael down, and I agree with that. Why not have one of the detectives reveal to Laurie, hey, Jamie never, this is what really happened. And you could have had that. You could have had that character do that. And again, I don't think Justin took it to that extent, but I'm adding the extent, if I remember correctly. But for my H2O experience, what would I give Halloween H2O as a film? It still gets a 6.5. I can't give this film a 7. I can't give it anything higher than what I've given it over the years and years and years I've seen it. And I still do watch it. I do think it's enjoyable. And I think the best moment for me, for Laurie Strode, is prior to her and her brother actually seeing each other, is the last hallucination she thinks she's having. And you see Michael around in the corner and you're going, oh God, he's there. And she thinks it's an hallucination, and it really isn't. It's not a hallucination. He's coming. He's there, you know? And that's something I felt, it gave me chills because I'm thinking, oh God, there's going to be this moment of surreal that she's going to know he's there and they're going to meet. And you were just, that's a moment I feel they built good enough that gave you chills in that movie. I think that's the one thing I loved about H2O there. You know, I do think that was very well done there. Again, I just wish they had done hallucinations more and the expectation. Yes, okay, no. All right. But I do think that's what this film was for me. Expectation of the timelines being tied. You know, there's always debate of this movie, should they have recast Dr. Loomis? I think no. You know, the longer I've thought about this, no. And I'll give you my reasons why. It's not just because of the way Donald Pleasance played the character. Yeah, that's a lot of it. But I think it's because of the legacy of the casting behind the character. Think about it. Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee turning John Carpenter down, and Donald Pleasance accepting the role um, because of his daughter convincing him to call him back. You know, that's something that's been so well documented throughout the franchise. And that's because his daughter was a fan of John's first film, Assault on Precinct 13. That's something that, when you look at it that way, and you look at the way Donald Pleasance went on and played the role, you go, oh my God, who else? There's no one else that should have been, you know, Sam Loomis. And that's credit to Pleasance, you know, and the way just he portrayed the character. And a credit to the writing of Carpenter and Hill, and the way Deborah and Hill and Dean Cundy shot the movie, way John directed the first film. You know, you do sort of wish John Carpenter wrote and directed Halloween H2O. That's something, and that's what Halloween H2O was for my brother, was the frustrating part, because there was the rumors that John Carpenter was gonna direct, you know, might might come back to the Halloween franchise. There were those rumors. And my brother said, I want him to come back. I want him to come back. And, you know, we were sitting there, and my brother looked at me, he goes, do you think he's coming back? And I said, no, I don't. And my brother said, why not? And I said, well, let's be honest. Does John Carpenter want to write and direct a Halloween sequel? No, you know, really, he didn't. And really, he hasn't. He hasn't. You know, you could say, well, he wrote 3, he wrote 2. Yeah, he did, but from that standpoint, he's had not much to do with the franchise after those films. I mean, he scored them, you know, they paid him, but paid for the money to his score, I should say. But that's something that, to me, you know, from my standpoint, everything I had heard from John's side and Mustafa's side was, you know, and I hate, you know, I know people are going to get mad at it. It says, I think John was very bitter at, you know, Mustafa, and I just think he, you know, sometimes pride is the hardest thing to swallow. Unfortunately, you know, they never worked together again. That's the one thing I'll take away from this franchise the most, that two men made magic happen in 1978. It wasn't just, yeah, look, John wrote the script for The Babysitter Murders. Aaron Yablan's said, okay, we need to set this on Halloween and change the title. You know, change the title, right? Here's Aaron, you know. And again, and you had Mustafa, who financed the film, and it was Aaron who, and John, who went to Mustafa, and Mustafa fell in love with Michael Myers. And because of Mustafa's love for Michael, we got all those sequels and all this fun to talk about this franchise, right? That's another part. It was Carpenter's creation and Mustafa's love for the character that John had created. You know, I think that's something that gets glossed over a lot in the Halloween franchise, you know, from that standpoint. But that's what Halloween H2O was for my brother. It was frustration that, you know, John did not come back and write and direct this movie, especially write and direct it. And I do wonder, you know, what kind of film. I don't think if John Carpenter would have wrote Halloween H2O, if that would have indeed been the title, I think we get the film of the century. I do. Look at John Carpenter's Vampires. I was blown away by that, and that I did see in theaters. I love that movie. But I definitely think it would have been one of the most memorable Halloweens. But this Halloween, Halloween H2O, I dare say was the most overhyped in the franchise and probably overrated. You know, again, I'm not trying to sit here and shit on the film, but again, I've said it has its moments. But from the standpoint of somebody who went to go pay and see it, it was a lot of overhype. And, you know, I know a lot of people dispute the end, whether you think that was him or you don't think that was him. For me, I knew it wasn't. You know, Michael Myers never put his hands up like this in the stop motion. Never. No, don't. Right? Come on. But that kind of emotion from him, you don't see that in the first two films. You know, and that's something too that I've pointed out. It's like, okay, if we're only acknowledging the first two, we can't go off of 4, 5, and 6. So when does Michael go like this in the first two? He doesn't. But that's just me. That's why I never believed that was him underneath that mask. And but again, you know, H2 brings a lot of different feelings out in all of us. You know, whether you liked it or you didn't like it, I think H2O has this. Does it have rewatchable quality? Yes. And here's where it gets it. I really, the feel of H2O is you still, to this day, I don't know why, I can't sit here and explain it to you. I still pop it in. And when I pop it, H2O into my PS4, I still get that feeling of, what if? What if John Carpenter and Mustafa Akkad could have worked together one last time? What if the timelines were tied together? What if this movie had been that? And when I throw H2O in and watch it, I don't so much get disappointed, but I get sort of, okay, this is what that movie turned out to be without not only John not writing or directing it, but someone else writing it and directing it, and this is what the movie did, and this is the direction they took it. And that's how I view Halloween H2O. You know, again, I don't hate the film, I just point out the things that what H2O meant for me as a fan, what my expectancy was going into the movie and going into the film itself. And it's crazy, you know, when I've been asked which movie do I like better, Halloween H2O or Halloween Resurrection, and I've answered point blank Halloween Resurrection many, many times. And some people might ask, well, why do you like that movie over this? Well, here's the thing. If you've been paying attention to this video, you've heard me say the word expectancy. My expectancy for H2O was this. It was high. With Resurrection, I'm going, man, they just literally sort of screwed the pooch with H2O. You know, and what I mean by that is, from a fan, I felt disappointed because those expectations weren't met, right? With Resurrection, I don't have expectations. I'm just going in and seeing what I get. And what I got was like, holy shit, this movie was better than the one I just saw in '98. And look, is Resurrection perfect? No, obviously not. But to me, it's very entertaining, and that's the thing too. With H2O, I love the performances, and with Resurrection, I love the performances. I think the Halloween franchise is going to be the most maligned franchise in horror history when it's all said and done. No matter where it goes from here, what happens in Halloween Kills, what happens in Halloween Ends, what happens 10 years from now with it. It will be the most maligned franchise in horror history ever. And that's just my perspective on it, on H2O, on the whole shebang. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Um, like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video.